next up, we're going to talk about MiniExtensions, which is a really useful tool that is comprised of a lot of different add-ons that you can use to extend the functionality of your base. So as you can see on my screen, there are quite a few different add-ons that you can use. The two most notable ones, and the ones that we use the most, are MiniExtension forms, which allow you to be able to create new records, but also edit records. And people externally to your Airtable base can edit those records as well. So it's very useful for that. And we also have a version of a portal here as well, which we tend to use for sign-on enabled reviewing of applications, or when you have somebody who needs to add comments or notes to a lot of different things all at once, we can kind of display something in a grid view, which I'm going to get into a little bit later in the demo portion of this section of the course. So there's a lot of different categories, and I really encourage you to explore what MiniExtensions has to offer. It can be useful for a lot of different things. But like I mentioned, what's really great about MiniExtensions is that the pricing for MiniExtensions is $79 a month. So it can be a tool that will save you quite a bit of money within Airtable, because there's definitely a lot of cases where you will find that your users don't need to edit very much within your database. Maybe it's only one record or a couple of records. So giving them full edit access to your database may be counterintuitive and add up quickly. An example that I like to pull on is the idea of running some kind of application through Airtable. In this case, you might want your applicants to be able to go back and edit their original application, or as they progress through the stages of your funding, you might want them to continue to add more information to an already existing application with further questions. In this case, your applicants would need access to edit their one record that has to do with their application. And so it wouldn't make very much sense to give them full access to your database. And there's also privacy issues there as well. So MiniExtensions can be a really good tool for that. And we'll get into a application scorecard demo as well in the end of this course.
Thanks for investing in your own knowledge base. I'm Cherry Yang, the founder of Claribase. We're going to be releasing our flagship course, Airtable Mastery, for free. In the course, you can find over 100 videos on topics like design, integration, automations, and interfaces. It's perfect for the Airtable champion who wants to build their database right the first time. You can sign up for the course at the link down below.
Great. Now that we've covered a little bit about what MiniExtensions can do, I'm really excited to dive right into the demo portion of this part of the course. We're going to demo two different add-ons that MiniExtension has that we find really useful in our day-to-day consulting practices. The first one that I'm going to cover is the MiniExtensions forms. And what's really great about MiniExtensions forms, and that sets it apart from Airtable's native forms, is that it allows you the ability to update existing records or add on to records that already exist in your Airtable database. This is really useful in the case of applications, which is what I'm going to demo, because as somebody progresses through your grant stages, you might want them to add additional information to their application or be able to go back and edit things as they come in. So I'm going to go over that. And then the second thing that I'm going to go over is the MiniExtensions version of a portal. And this is also really useful for an application use case in the case of the reviewers, because they may have many applications that they need to review and assign scores to. And by using MiniExtensions portals, we can pull up all of those in a grid view, and they're able to see the applications as well as assign their scores to them all in one place, which can be really helpful and save a lot of time. So jumping right into forms, you can see on my screen that I have a very basic demo base to go over that use case I was just discussing. So on the applications table, this is where I'm gathering all my applicant data and where I want to set up the form for applicants to be able to edit their data or add more information. So to do this, I'm going to navigate to the extensions portion of the Airtable database, and I'm going to add an extension, looking for MiniExtensions extension. That's a mouthful, but that'll be fine. I'm just adding it to the base right now. Great, and it will prompt you to sign in. And once you're in, you can see that I don't have any extensions set up yet, but we can do that really easily by just clicking on New Extension. It's going to ask you for permission to store the base structure. This is just so that MiniExtensions is able to see all the different tables and write directly to Airtable. So I'm just going to hit Allow on that. So here we can see a list of a lot of the extensions that we discussed briefly earlier. I'm going to go straight into Forms and choose the table that I wanted on, Applications. I'm going to create it. And here, what happens automatically is that MiniExtensions is going to put in every field that exists on that table. That isn't always the most useful, so I personally always like to start by removing all of the fields and then adding in the fields that I want my form filler outer to fill in. So I'm going to add in the fields. One thing to note here is that the fields do go in the order in which you click them. So if you want to save yourself some time from dragging and dropping, you might want to click them in the order that you want to see it. So I'm going to grab some applicant information like the first name, last name, email, and phone. I'm also interested in knowing if the company title that is applying for this grant, as well as any co-applicants. So I'm going to add those there. Then I'm going to grab some basic information on this application. So the project title, one-liner, I'm going to grab an executive summary, the value and benefit, as well as having a approach. And then I'm going to put in some information about the funding that they would actually like to receive. So I've got a field for financial support, use of funding, and then of course a currency field for the amount requested. Then I click done on that, and then you can see all of the fields appear here. If you do want to change the order, you can just drag and drop them. So I'm going to put request funding right underneath financial support. Another thing to note when it comes to MiniExtensions forms is you can go ahead and edit each field a little bit further. So by clicking on the field, you can see that there are a few different options. You can make certain fields read-only if you don't want them to be editable. You can make them required or not. And you can also mask a section header. So you can create a section on certain fields or mask what the name of the field is under standard options in title. If you don't want it to display what the field name is in Airtable, you can overwrite that. So if in this example, I'm looking at first name, I could write, please enter first name if I prefer to have the form that way. So now that I've added all the fields that I need, I'm ready to go with this form. So up in this left corner, there's a button here for open form. When you click on it, you have the option to create records or edit records. So if you choose create records, you'll be brought to a link that is similar to Airtable forms, where you'd be creating records on the applicant table based on the fields that you selected. When you hit edit records, this is where you get a link that you can put into your Airtable that creates a editable version of data existing in the application table. So I'm going to copy that link and go into my Airtable base. And I should have a field here called applicant link for updates. I'm just going to replace what already exists there and save that. And now for these ones here, if I choose to click on the Abdul Smith go-to-market fund, I will see that a lot of the information is already pre-populated. So this is exactly what's in the base. And if I overwrite any of this or add anything to financial support, for example, then you will see that pop up. So let me just type something in. Great, and let's say that I'm actually going to request $2,500. All right, and save that, which is great. And then as I look on this, if I find the financial support field, just open that up, you can see that we have the financial support test there. So that's just a little bit on what MiniExtension forms can do. It has a really wide array of use cases, but I would say if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to edit on existing records and it's a very contained area of editing, this would be a really great example of where you might want to leverage MiniExtensions instead of granting edit access to your entire Airtable database. Now that we've looked at forms, let's dive into that portal that I mentioned earlier. So before I get into building it in MiniExtensions, I want to talk a little bit more about this demo base and how it's going to come together. So in the demo base, we've familiarized ourselves with the applications table, but we also have two other tables here, one being reviewers. So this is just a list of all of the people that I want to be able to review applications. And you can think of this table as a user table. This is going to be useful because as part of the portal that I'm going to set up, I'm going to set up a sign-in wall where the people who are listed on this table need to sign into the portal using their email and PIN, which you can see on the screen. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the reviewer submissions table. So this table is where you would have a record for every review that you want on a certain application assigned to the individual reviewing it. So you can see towards the bottom of this table, I have 3 records assigned to myself, Chantal, and these are the records that I'm going to want to review. And as I scroll towards the right, you can see that there is a subset of questions where I'll be able to assign rankings to each of these applications. So if you wanted to add a new application, it's just a matter of adding new records for me to review. So I'm going to assign it to myself and then choose a application that is not granted or rejected yet. So I'll go ahead and choose the research grant here by Cherry. Awesome. So now that this is set up, essentially what this mini extension portal is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to create a place where I can log in and only see these 4 records and then assign my ratings accordingly. So mini extensions is in a little bit of a transitionary period right now. So when we were talking about forms, I entered it through the mini extensions extension that exists in Airtable's extension area. However, they are in the middle of moving over a lot of their different extensions to be visible in this new portal. So I'm actually going to get to the grid portal through a slightly different way, which I'm going to show you now. So I've just logged in directly to the mini extensions website here. And when you log in, you should get something like this that says, go to Airtable to find your extensions. As I just mentioned, they're just moving this particular grid portal over. So I'm going to click at the bottom to looking for old extensions to get where I want. The functionality of what I'm going to show you is going to be almost identical in the new portal when it does come over. So the learnings should still be really valid here. So I'm going to go to the top and add an extension. And I'm going to look for portal grid. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to name it application score cards. I'm going to save that and I'm going to start to set it up. So at the top here, you would enter in your API key and choose the base. And the base that I'm looking for is funding applications and scorecards. I'm going to choose the table that I want to use. So this table is going to be the table where your review records live. So in the case of this demo, that's going to be the reviewer submissions table. Step 2 is setting up a login page, which I alluded to before. So up here, the first option is to pick the field in which the reviewer or the user lives in on the application's review page. So in this case, it's simply just called reviewer. And then I'll choose the different login fields. So in this case, I want my reviewers to log in with their email and PIN. So I'll choose those 2. And then at the bottom here, you also have the option to limit who is able to log in based on a view in the users table. So if you had a very large users table with maybe all your applicants in it, but also your reviewers as a people's table all together in your database, you could limit this view to only be people who review applications. Step 3 is selecting which records that are going to be viewed. So in this case, I'm actually going to click all active applications as a way to narrow down which applications are seen. I've done this because as people start to review more applications or maybe over multiple year cycles, you're not going to want to see any applications that you've previously already given a score to or that have already been granted or rejected. Next, I'm going to add in the fields. So in this case, I want to be able to see the application itself for reference, and so I know which one I'm scoring on. And then I'll have a few questions here that I'll want my reviewers to answer. So I'm going to go with, is it a novel or unique solution, the impact on the community, and as well as, does the proposed solution seem viable? And then finally, I'm going to add an area for feedback and questions as an open text field. I'm going to save that. So these are the fields that are going to be displayed in the portal. If I want to be able to see the applications further, that is possible for linked records. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see that under the options here, there's an option here for previewing records. And basically, it's going to prompt you to create an extension so that you can preview the records on the applicant table. So I'm going to click this little plus here to create that. And I'm going to call this applications preview. I'm going to save that. This setup looks really similar to what we were just at, but essentially under step 2 and view records, I'm going to go in and add the fields that I think are relevant for the applicants. for the applications. So I'm just going to put in a couple here, the project title, the one-liner, and just a few options here. So I've put kind of a couple here to illustrate what this could look like. I'm going to click save, and that should be about it for the setup on viewing linked records. And we can also choose to open it in a new tab to replace the current window or open in a pop-up. I find the pop-up works quite well, so I'm going to leave it as that and click done. Like in the forms, you can assign individual titles for each and also allow these records to be edited in the grid. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn on editing in grid. Great. Step 4 is setting up the ability to actually be able to edit the records. So you're going to want to allow your users to edit these records. So I'll toggle that on and then add in the same fields that I had from above. So is it a novel or unique solution? What impact will it have on the community? Does the solution seem viable? And then feedback and questions. All right, so that should be about it for the setup. So I'm going to preview what I've just built by clicking on Save and Preview in the top right corner. Great, so right away you can see that I'm greeted with a sign in box. So I'm just going to sign in with my email address and my personal PIN so that I can view the applications that I'm meant to review. Okay, great. So what you can see here are the 4 applications that I was assigned to, along with 4 different questions here. So I'm just going to make them a little bit more legible by pulling them further out. This is something that we can modify, so I will show you how to make a few improvements to this interface after we've poked around in it a little bit. So I can click on any one of these applications to see the information that I laid out previously. So you can see, I can see the project title, the one-liner, some information, as well as any attachments associated with that record. And then I can also directly edit and start assigning a score to this particular record. And this is also updated in real time in Airtable, which is quite nice. What's great about this too is that as somebody continuously comes back to this portal, no information is lost. It will just display what they've recently put in or the record as it exists in Airtable. So that is really nice because if somebody has to edit a lot of different records or has a lot of applications to review, they may not be able to do it all in one sitting. So they'll always be able to come back and edit. Another way to assign scores, instead of just directly clicking into each cell in this grid, is to come over to this pencil portion here in the corner, and it brings you to a pop-up window that allows you to answer all the questions on that application pretty quickly. So that is also an option as well. We can save that. Great. And so back into the Airtable base from MiniExtensions, I was just going to show that you can see that those 2 records that I edited have been updated with my scores. So I mentioned that we can improve how this portal looks a little bit. So one thing that I always like to do is I like for it to be legible right from the beginning. So what I'll go into is in step 3, view records, on each field that I'm displaying, I can actually set a default column width. And so this column width is done with pixels, so it can be a little bit hard to find the right balance, but I'm just going to put in a few numbers here to show you what that might look like. So I think this one will probably need about 350 pixels. This one may be closer to 500. This one maybe 400. And feedback and questions shouldn't need much at all. I'll leave that at 300. I've definitely done this before. That's why I have a sense for how big these columns should be, but you can always go back and edit and preview as needed to get the right fit. Another option that you can do is create a header for your portal. So this is done through extensions as well. So I can call this score header. And in here, you can basically have a title. I'm just going to call this Applications to Review. And then you also have the option to add in a logo field or add some more branding to make it feel a little bit more personalized to your organization. For now, I'm just going to omit that and click Save. It is also really helpful to add a description. So I will add in a description just asking the reviewers to fill in all of their scores. So please fill in your scores for each application listed below. And I'm going to have the description alignment be in the center of the page for this one. So once again, I'm going to click save and then exit out of this, and we can look at what our new portal looks like. So clicking save and preview should bring me back in. What's nice is when you are developing, since I've already signed in the first time, I'm not going to need to bypass that sign in again. It's just going to bring me directly into what I would see. So you can see that my title has been added, applications to review, as well as my description. You could also see that all of my fields now are wide enough so that I can read the entire prompt, which is quite nice. Great. One other thing to note here is, as I mentioned, I'm coming back into this portal, but for the ones that I've already reviewed, I can see those scores there. And then I have 2 left to review for this particular application cycle. There's one last thing that I wanted to cover, and that is the idea of giving a magic link to your reviewers. So in the case that you didn't want to have them go through the login process, you can set up a magic link or a link that helps them bypass this sign-in process. This can be really useful if you're going to trigger sending these review notices through an email automation. You might just want to provide them with a link in that case and just make their lives a little bit easier. So similar to the forms, I'm going to have a field set up on the user table where I can put in submit rating URL. So I'm just going to replace the URL with the current one that I've created. And this should allow for me to get into my portal and see. So let's click into mine first, and then I'll click into somebody else's just so that you can see how that would work. So logging into myself, this should be very familiar. I see the 4 applications assigned to me. And then just for fun, let's click on to Cherry's and see the ones that she's been applying, that she's going to be reviewing. So you can see that Cherry's very on top of it and has already reviewed almost all of hers, but you can see that she's got a couple of different ones to review than I've had. Great, and you always have the option to log out as well and log back in. So that is, again, a really brief overview of portals, but I hope that you can find a really good use case for it. We find that a lot of our clients do really like this tool because for people who only need to touch very specific parts of your database, but maybe multiple records, this is a really useful tool to enable them to do that, again, without having any back-end access to your database and shielding any sensitive information that may exist on other tables.